a legendary lawyer, a rising congresswoman, and one insult that set the internet on fire. It all began in a sleek, bustling studio, the air thick with anticipation, the cameras rolling, the nation watching. On one side sat Alan Dershowitz, a towering figure in law, his reputation forged in courtrooms and cable news panels alike. On the other, Jasmine Crockett, a voice rising from communities too often overlooked, armed with intellect, composure, and the quiet power of lived experience. The tension was palpable, electric enough to make the audience lean in, even from thousands of miles away. Then it happened. In a moment that would be clipped, shared, and replayed endlessly across social media, Dershowitz sneered. The words, sharp and dismissive, cut through the live broadcast, a pointed insult questioning the legitimacy of Crockett's law degree. The camera froze on his smirk, the arrogance practically radiating off the screen. Viewers at home recoiled. Gasps filled the studio, a collective murmur of disbelief and outrage rippling through the online feed. Comments exploded in real time. Did he just say that? How dare he? She's earned every inch of that degree. The tension wasn't just in the room. It was in every living room, every phone, every pair of eyes glued to the screen. For a moment, it seemed as if the narrative had been stolen. The giant had spoken, and the young congresswoman might crumble under the weight of condescension broadcast nationwide. But there was a subtle shift, a tightening of Crockett's jaw, a flash of calm determination in her eyes. The audience, sensing it, held its collective breath. The world was poised on the edge of a revelation, waiting to see whether she would retreat or rise. And then, in that suspended second, the unthinkable was teased, a response so measured, so unexpectedly brilliant, that it promised to turn the tables entirely. Already, viewers felt the creeping pull of FOMO, hearts racing, minds anticipating a rebuttal that could redefine the conversation. Clips would soon circulate, hashtags would ignite, and those who witnessed it firsthand knew something historic was unfolding. But what Jasmine said next didn't just silence the room, it left the nation's legal experts stunned. The studio lights burned brighter now, each beam catching the tension in the room like a spotlight on a powder keg. This wasn't just another political debate, it was a battle for credibility, for respect, for the narrative itself. Millions of viewers were tuned in, scrolling, refreshing, and watching the seconds tick by, waiting for the next verbal volley. Every word, every glance carried weight. For Dershowitz, it was a test of authority, an opportunity to remind the nation why his voice had been amplified for decades. For Jasmine Crockett, it was a proving ground, a live arena where years of sacrifice, study, and public service could either shine or be dismissed in a single, cruel remark. The stakes were immediate and tangible. A single misstep could ripple across social media, headlines, and reputations. Dershowitz's brand of dominance relied on confidence, on the subtle, often cutting art of condescension. To humiliate his opponent on live air was to reaffirm a hierarchy of power, elite versus outsider, credentialed versus emergent, arrogance versus perseverance. Yet this wasn't just about personal ego. It was a symbolic confrontation. Crockett embodied a new wave of voices, those forged in struggle, shaped by community advocacy, and driven by principles rather than pedigree. Her presence on the stage alone challenged centuries of assumed authority and inherited influence. Every camera angle, every live reaction amplified the stakes. Audience members shifted in their seats, commentators whispered to producers, and viewers online began dissecting every syllable. The tension wasn't theoretical, it was electric, a collision of two worlds that Americans everywhere could feel. Elitism versus dignity. Arrogance versus perseverance. It was a narrative that transcended one insult, one law degree, one moment in a television studio. It touched on identity, representation, and the relentless fight to claim space in a world that often tells you it doesn't belong to you. And yet, the true magnitude of what was happening had only just begun to emerge. This wasn't merely a clash of personalities or a fleeting media moment. It was a window into the deeper structures of power in America. The insult itself, while sharp and calculated, revealed something far more pervasive, the way authority can dismiss, belittle, and intimidate, and the courage it takes to stand unshaken in response. Viewers sensed that the unfolding drama would not end with a single comeback. It would echo, provoke conversation, and perhaps even reshape perceptions of who deserves respect in the public sphere. Every word exchanged, every pause and intonation, layered suspense onto suspense. The audience felt it, the building pressure of an inevitable escalation, the sense that something consequential was about to unfold. The stage was set, the players aligned, and the first shot had already been fired. The world was watching, holding its collective breath, anticipating the moment when composure and intelligence might collide with arrogance and entitlement. And to understand why Dershowitz thought he could get away with it, we need to rewind. Alan Dershowitz. To millions, the name evokes brilliance, authority, a legal mind honed over decades at the pinnacle of power. Harvard Law. Courtrooms where history was made. Media appearances that turned complex legal battles into digestible narratives for a fascinated public. He was, by every conventional measure, a titan, a figure whose opinions shaped the discourse of entire generations. And yet, behind the accolades and awards lay a persona that had become as polarizing as it was respected. Dershowitz's brilliance was undeniable. He dissected cases with surgical precision, his arguments sharp, his memory near photographic. But brilliance, in his hands, often fused with arrogance. Confidence became condescension, eloquence sometimes mass dismissal. To the world, it was charmingly formidable. To those on the receiving end, it could feel suffocating, humiliating, even cruel. The sane mind that argued passionately for civil liberties and justice could, in the next breath, belittle a colleague, a junior lawyer, or a rising political figure simply for daring to challenge him. Intelligence had become a weapon, a tool not just to persuade, but to dominate, to assert hierarchy, to reinforce the world according to his rules. This duality defined Dershowitz's public persona. He was celebrated for defending the disenfranchised in principle, yet he often wielded his platform to undermine those who threatened his position, intentionally or not. Critics called him contradictory, a champion of liberty who wielded ridicule like a blade, a defender of rights who occasionally seemed blind to humility. He had mastered the art of speaking truth, yes, but only when it aligned with his narrative, only when it amplified his authority. Any dissent, any interruption, any challenge, no matter how legitimate, risked being met with a smirk, a cutting remark, or a dismissive wave of the hand. The pattern had repeated countless times over decades of television appearances, courtroom showdowns, and op-ed columns. Dershowitz's voice carried weight, not just because of expertise, but because he had cultivated an aura of inevitability. You listened because you respected him, feared him, or both. He had become a living example of the archetype of the villain in modern public life. Brilliant, eloquent, dominant, but willing to bend intellect into a tool of intimidation. In every debate, every interview, he sought to assert supremacy, testing opponents for cracks, waiting for the moment to strike. And when he sat across from Jasmine Crockett, the history of his tactics was unmistakable. Here was a woman with rising influence, a sharp intellect, and the kind of authenticity that could capture the public imagination. To Dershowitz, she was a target, a momentary distraction, someone he could dismiss with a single cutting line. In his mind, this was the stage he had controlled countless times before. The arrogance that had fueled his career whispered that a young Congresswoman's credentials were trivial, that a sharp mind could be overshadowed by fame and experience. He didn't see Crockett as an equal, but as a challenge to be subdued, a puzzle to assert dominance over in real time, live on the nation's stage. Yet beneath that arrogance lay a tension, almost imperceptible to those who only saw the surface. Every act of condescension, every verbal flourish designed to belittle, carried with it the risk of miscalculation. The same brilliance that gave him authority could also create blind spots, moments where the underestimated could turn the tables. Dershowitz had built his career on patterns, on predictable outcomes, on the assumption that power and reputation alone could intimidate. And in that assumption lay vulnerability. This was the villain in full form, razor-sharp intelligence, tempered by hubris, wielded to diminish rather than uplift, capable of commanding attention yet blind to the subtle strength of the very people he sought to belittle. He was a master of the spotlight, addicted to its glare, and confident that few could ever match his performance under it. And yet, history has a way of testing such figures, forcing moments where preparation, courage, and principle collide with arrogance, and sometimes the results are catastrophic for those who underestimate their opponent. But on the other side of this confrontation stood someone whose journey made her unshakable. Jasmine Crockett's story begins far from the glare of television cameras and the marble halls of fame. She was raised in a world defined by hard work, sacrifice, and the constant hum of striving for more than circumstance would allow. Her parents, working class and unyielding, instilled in her a sense of responsibility not just to herself, but to every person whose voice might be ignored or dismissed. From an early age, Crockett understood that opportunity was hard-won, and that dignity often required persistence against invisible barriers. It was this foundation, this unshakable grit, that would carry her through challenges far greater than any live debate could ever pose. Her path into law was neither linear nor easy. Scholarships, long nights poring over casebooks, and internships in crowded legal aid offices became her proving ground. She quickly learned that the law could be a tool of liberation, or oppression, depending on who wielded it. In each courtroom, each community meeting, each advocacy campaign, Crockett's approach was defined by empathy and precision. She listened first, understood fully, and then acted decisively, never losing sight of the people her work was meant to serve. Every case she took, every argument she presented, built her reputation as a lawyer whose intellect was matched only by her unwavering integrity. Crockett's career became a testament to perseverance. She championed civil rights, fought tirelessly for equitable housing, and defended clients whose struggles mirrored her own community's hardships. She did not come to law with privilege or legacy. She arrived with lived experience, understanding the nuances of injustice and the courage required to challenge it. While some in her field relied on reputation or name recognition, Crockett relied on preparation, empathy, and an unflinching commitment to justice. Each victory, each hard-fought settlement, cemented her growing authority and earned the respect of colleagues who recognized that her law degree was not a certificate on paper, but a symbol of struggle, endurance, and brilliance forged under pressure. Her journey into politics was equally grounded in principle. Observing systemic inequities firsthand, Crockett realized that legislation and public policy could either perpetuate barriers or dismantle them. She carried her courtroom tenacity into public service, advocating for marginalized communities with the same clarity and courage that defined her legal work. Her rise was not meteoric, but deliberate, each campaign built upon the last, each victory a testament to her ability to translate advocacy into impact. Supporters admired her not for charisma alone, but for authenticity, a quality increasingly rare in a world dominated by spectacle. Throughout her ascent, Crockett encountered skeptics who underestimated her intelligence, belittled her credentials, or assumed she would falter under pressure. Each of these moments became a crucible, refining her ability to remain calm, assess situations quickly, and deliver responses that cut through arrogance without compromising dignity. Her law degree, often questioned by outsiders unfamiliar with the weight of her achievements, symbolized more than academic accomplishment. It was a living narrative of perseverance, resilience, and relentless commitment to truth. By the time she faced Alan Dershowitz across a live broadcast, Crockett was prepared in every way possible. Her experiences had taught her the power of presence, the strength of measured words, and the inevitability that integrity, when exercised with clarity, could disarm even the most imposing opponents. She knew that brilliance alone was not enough. It was discipline, preparation, and courage that created moments that reverberated beyond the immediate confrontation. She had faced long odds, systemic prejudice, and powerful adversaries before, and emerged not just unscathed, but elevated. Crockett's story inspired admiration because it was relatable and aspirational at once. She represented a generation of Americans who carry the weight of history, who navigate structures designed to limit them, and who rise nonetheless. Her law degree, earned through grit and sacrifice, was not a shield of privilege, but a beacon of possibility for anyone who had ever been underestimated. Every challenge she faced had been a rehearsal for this very moment, where intellect, resilience, and composure would collide with arrogance and entitlement in real time, broadcast to millions. And when their paths collided live on air, sparks flew. The tension in the studio was thick enough to taste. Every camera angle captured the subtle shifts in body language, the micro-expressions that hinted at the storm brewing beneath the surface. Alan Dershowitz, sensing an opportunity, leaned forward, his voice sharper now, cutting through the dialogue like a scalpel. "Your law degree," he said, eyes narrowing, voice dripping with skepticism, "doesn't quite carry the weight of experience some of us have accumulated over decades." The words landed like stones, splashing against the carefully constructed composure of Jasmine Crockett. The audience flinched collectively. Online, comments flew faster than the moderators could track. Gasps, murmurs, outrage, everywhere, viewers were registering the insult, their emotions swinging between disbelief and anticipation. But Crockett, seated with a steady posture, let the words wash over her. No defensive flinch, no sharp retort yet, only a tightening of her jaw and a quiet focus in her eyes that suggested a storm was quietly gathering. Her calm was deliberate, a silent assertion that arrogance would not dictate the narrative. Dershowitz sensed the pause and pushed harder. He leaned closer to the microphone, volume rising slightly, tone edged with impatience. "You may have studied law," he continued, "but some lessons in the real world can't be found in books." The subtle smirk returned, the kind that had silenced opponents countless times before. In that moment, it seemed like a trap, a test to see if Crockett would crack, reveal uncertainty, or respond with defensiveness. The audience felt it, hearts racing as the verbal sparring escalated into something electric, something almost tangible. Interruptions began to punctuate the exchange. Co-hosts shifted nervously, trying to regain control, but the tension was too high. Each exchange added pressure, like tightening screws on an unseen mechanism. Dershowitz grew more animated, hands slicing through the air, words sharper, more dismissive. He had relied on patterns for decades: intimidate first, dominate second. And yet, Crockett remained steady, her demeanor calm but every subtle signal telling the audience she was preparing something deliberate. Her eyes flicked briefly to the cameras, then back to him, a subtle acknowledgement that she knew exactly where this was going. Viewers at home felt a shift. They weren't just watching a debate, they were witnessing a duel of intellect and character. The underdog, the woman underestimated by so many, was holding her ground while the seasoned titan showed cracks in his armor. The dynamic was irresistible, arrogance colliding with resilience, experience measured against principle, hubris brushing up against composure. Social media lit up with predictions, cheers, and anxious anticipation. Everyone was waiting for the moment when Crockett would strike, when the balance would shift. The studio seemed to hold its breath. Each word, each pause, each calculated glance added layers to the drama. Dershowitz, now visibly rattled by the absence of the expected flinch, raised his voice, gesturing as though to fill the silence with dominance. But Crockett's calm only amplified the contrast, making his aggression seem sharper, more unhinged, more vulnerable. Viewers weren't just rooting for her, they were emotionally invested, sensing the inevitability of a moment that would redefine the encounter. And then came the response, the one moment no one saw coming. The room seemed to freeze. Cameras caught every subtle movement, the slight shift of Crockett's shoulders, the narrowing of her eyes, the composed pause before she spoke. The studio lights flickered across her face, illuminating the quiet confidence that had been building for years, forged in courtrooms and advocacy halls. For a fraction of a second, time seemed suspended, as if the entire nation collectively held its breath, waiting to see how the underdog would respond to a legal titan's dismissive insult. Every viewer knew the moment had arrived. Every second of silence intensified the suspense, magnifying the anticipation. Then she began. Her voice was steady, clear, each word measured with precision, each syllable carefully placed to land with maximum effect. "With all due respect, Professor," she said, the politeness only amplifying the tension, "my law degree is not just a credential. It represents years of dedication, sacrifice, and the pursuit of justice for those who cannot always defend themselves. Her words, simple in structure but weighted with authority, caused a ripple through the audience. Gasps, nods, and murmurs began spreading, as if the air itself acknowledged the power of what was being said. She continued, layering facts with wit, dismantling the arrogance that had attempted to overshadow her experience. "You have spent decades in courtrooms, yes," she said, her tone calm yet firm. "But I have spent my life in the communities those courtrooms often overlook, fighting for civil rights, advocating for equitable access to justice, and ensuring that the law serves everyone, not just those with privilege." Every phrase landed with deliberate force. Legal experts leaned forward, scribbling notes, murmuring under their breaths, astonished at the precision and eloquence with which she navigated a verbal minefield. Her next point struck with devastating clarity. "And while degrees and titles carry weight, true expertise is proven through action, not condescension." The pause that followed was cinematic, a beat long enough for the impact to sink in, for the audience to register the full scope of what she had just said. It was a line designed to puncture arrogance, and it did so effortlessly. Dershowitz, previously the picture of composure, flinched, his jaw tightening as the realization set in. The woman he had underestimated had outmaneuvered him without raising her voice. Crowd reactions escalated, layering the moment with emotional resonance. Studio hosts exchanged astonished glances. One muttered under their breath, "I did not see that coming." Social media feeds exploded in real time. Hashtags surged. Clips were clipped, shared, and commented upon by thousands in the first minutes alone. "Jasmine Crockett just dismantled Dershowitz live," one post read. "Absolute masterclass in poise and precision," said another. The ripple effect was instantaneous, reinforcing the notion that this was not just a debate, but a historic moment in public discourse. Crockett's strategy was clear. She let the arrogance of her opponent speak for itself, while constructing a response that combined intellect with lived experience. She layered her rebuttal in a way that highlighted contrasts: the dismissive condescension of Dershowitz versus her calm, evidence-driven authority. Line by line, she turned the attack back on him, using facts, ethics, and lived reality as a weapon far sharper than insult. Each phrase dismantled the supposed superiority he relied upon, exposing the vulnerability beneath the bravado. The tension escalated further as Dershowitz attempted to respond, his voice rising, a mix of frustration and disbelief seeping in. But Crockett maintained composure, allowing each of his interruptions to underscore the imbalance rather than weaken her position. The contrast could not have been starker. The seasoned pundit flustered, stammering, trying to reclaim dominance, while Crockett remained in control, guiding the conversation with measured grace. Every viewer watching recognized the spectacle for what it was: a masterful reversal, a lesson in dignity prevailing over arrogance. She delivered her final line with slow, deliberate timing. "Respect in law, as in life, is earned through service, integrity, and courage, not through intimidation or dismissive words. And if that is the standard by which we measure expertise, I am proud to stand here today." The pause that followed allowed the weight of her words to settle, hanging in the air like a verdict rendered. The audience erupted, applause, cheers, exclamations of admiration filling the room and spilling into the online world simultaneously. The moment crystallized into what would soon be replayed endlessly across social media, a defining cinematic beat in the ongoing story of hero versus arrogance. Dershowitz, caught off guard by the precision and moral clarity of the response, visibly lost composure. His smirk faltered, his hand gestures became erratic, and the carefully constructed facade of authority began to crumble. Experts whispered in astonishment. Hosts exchanged incredulous glances. The audience, both in the studio and at home, recognized that something monumental had occurred. Crockett's triumph was not loud or theatrical. It was deliberate, incisive, and devastating in its effectiveness. She had transformed an insult into an opportunity, and the result was a display of intellect and moral courage that few could match. Every element of the encounter reinforced the cinematic drama: suspenseful timing, stark contrast between hero and villain, escalating tension, and ultimate payoff. The room, electrified, seemed to vibrate with the energy of collective recognition that they had witnessed a pivotal moment, one that would be talked about, analyzed, and celebrated for weeks to come. The hero's victory was complete, not just in words, but in the resonance it created across the audience, the legal community, and the public sphere. But if Dershowitz thought the embarrassment would end there, he was wrong. The moment Crockett's words hit the airwaves, the studio seemed to explode with energy, and the digital world followed almost instantaneously. Social media feeds lit up like fireworks on the 4th of July. Hashtags praising her composure surged to the top of trending lists. Hashtag mic drop Crockett. Hashtag dignity wins. Hashtag respect in action. Clips of her response were shared, replayed, and dissected by millions within minutes. Every frame, every line, every measured pause became a talking point, sparking discussion from living rooms to coffee shops, from classrooms to boardrooms. The internet had found its new hero, and the nation couldn't look away. Legal experts weighed in, stunned not by the insult she had endured but by the precision, poise, and clarity with which she dismantled it. Commentators praised her ability to remain calm under fire while delivering a devastating rebuttal rooted in facts and lived experience. What Crockett demonstrated was a rare combination of intellect and moral authority. One tweeted, "This is how debates should be conducted, through preparation, empathy, and courage, not condescension." Analysts dissected her phrasing, noting the careful balance between wit and restraint, the strategic use of silence and emphasis. Every nod of approval, every public commendation amplified her standing as a rising force in law and politics. Memes and sound bites began to proliferate. Late-night comedians seized on the moment, replaying the exchange and contrasting Dershowitz's flustered gestures with Crockett's unwavering calm. The images spread virally, side-by-side frames showing arrogance meeting composure. Social media users claimed ownership of the narrative, crafting GIFs, sharing quotes, and riffing on her lines. Ordinary viewers joined the conversation, posting captions like, "Finally, someone stood up to him," and "She said what we all wish we could say." In this digital echo chamber, Crockett's response became more than a single televised moment. It became a cultural reference point, a lesson in dignity and power accessible to everyone. The ripple effect reached far beyond the studio. Public figures, commentators, and politicians began referencing the exchange, framing it as emblematic of a larger generational shift: respect, empathy, and intelligence holding their own against decades of ingrained elitism. Crockett's visibility skyrocketed, elevating her beyond the immediate news cycle. She became not just a congresswoman or lawyer, but a symbol of what resilience, preparation, and principle could achieve when faced with public humiliation. Meanwhile, Dershowitz, previously untouchable in his domain, experienced the inverse effect. His credibility, while still intact among some followers, took a public hit, and the optics of the moment were impossible to ignore. Audience engagement became a living testament to the impact of her words. Ordinary citizens shared personal anecdotes of feeling belittled, underestimated, or dismissed, aligning their stories with Crockett's victory. Her triumph was theirs too. The sense of validation and empowerment was palpable. For the first time, millions saw arrogance and elitism confronted with dignity and intellect, and it resonated. Online communities celebrated her, not just for the theatrical victory, but for demonstrating the possibility of standing firm in the face of condescension, of turning insult into opportunity, of demanding recognition through merit rather than status. Yet even amid the laughter, the memes, and the trending hashtags, there was a deeper recognition emerging. The shockwaves weren't limited to entertainment or fleeting social media virality. They were an undeniable statement about respect, justice, and the shifting balance of power in public discourse. Every repost, every commentary, every clip shared with a caption of admiration reinforced the lesson that composure, preparation, and moral authority could overwhelm arrogance, and that the voices often underestimated had the capacity to shape the national conversation. The studio, the internet, and the world seemed to hum with the aftershocks of what had just occurred. What began as a single insult had cascaded into a monumental public moment, illustrating the potency of intellect combined with integrity. Ordinary viewers felt seen, empowered, and inspired. Legal experts, commentators, and even casual observers recognized that this was no ordinary rebuttal. It was a declaration that dignity and courage were not only powerful, they were unstoppable. But beyond the memes and trending clips lay a lesson far deeper. The clash between Crockett and Dershowitz was more than a single televised exchange. It was a microcosm of a larger battle playing out across society. It symbolized the enduring tension between elitism and dignity, between inherited privilege and hard-won perseverance. One side relied on reputation, history, and the weight of expectation. The other relied on preparation, resilience, and a steadfast commitment to principles. In that moment, viewers witnessed a stark illustration of how integrity and courage can rise above arrogance, how merit can speak louder than pedigree, and how lived experience can carry authority where titles alone cannot. Crockett's response reframed the insult not as a personal attack, but as a lens through which the audience could see a broader truth. She demonstrated that education, identity, and resilience are not just credentials, they are values that define character. Her law degree was not a token of prestige, it was a testament to sacrifice, dedication, and the pursuit of justice. Her identity, shaped by community and struggle, was not a limitation but a lens of empathy and insight. And her resilience, forged through years of advocacy and perseverance, made her unshakable in the face of condescension. In reframing the insult this way, she elevated the conversation from a debate about credentials to a universal message about respect, dignity, and the true measure of expertise. The crescendo of this moment was as emotional as it was instructive. Across the studio and beyond, the audience recognized that what they had witnessed was not just a victory for one person, but a triumph of principle. Her composure became a beacon, showing that responding to arrogance with patience and clarity can be far more powerful than matching aggression with aggression. It was a demonstration that the strength of ideas, grounded in truth and experience, always outlasts the fleeting impact of insult. In a world often dominated by bluster and spectacle, Crockett's measured, principled response reminded viewers that quiet authority can have seismic impact. This was not merely a lesson for lawyers or politicians. It was a lesson for everyone who has ever felt underestimated or dismissed. Crockett's triumph underscored that dignity is not fragile, that perseverance is a form of power, and that respect earned through action outweighs respect demanded through status. It sent a message to aspiring leaders, to students, to anyone navigating spaces historically reserved for the privileged. Your journey, your preparation, and your integrity are your greatest weapons. In one live, unforgettable exchange, Crockett made it clear that courage and composure can redefine the rules of engagement. This wasn't just her victory, the narrative seemed to say. It was a reminder that dignity always outlasts disrespect. It was a lesson that rippled far beyond the studio, reaching living rooms, social feeds, classrooms, and workplaces. People shared her words, analyzed her tactics, and internalized the broader truths she demonstrated, that true authority and influence are not granted, they are earned through effort, character, and resilience. And in that realization lay the ultimate resonance of the moment. Crockett's success was not defined by a single rebuttal, nor by the faltering of a veteran pundit. It was defined by the values she embodied and the example she set. The narrative she created transcended the particulars of the exchange, transforming a personal confrontation into a universal story of triumph, empowerment, and principle. And for those watching, it wasn't just about her. It was about all of us. The moment that ignited headlines, social media feeds, and living room debates began with a single insult: Alan Dershowitz questioning the value of Jasmine Crockett's law degree. What followed, however, transformed that insult into something far greater than personal vindication. Crockett's response, precise, calm, and devastatingly effective, didn't just silence the room, it reframed the conversation entirely. In that live exchange, viewers witnessed more than a debate. They witnessed dignity triumph over arrogance, integrity prevailing over entitlement, and truth rising above elitism. This wasn't merely about a law degree or a televised confrontation. It was a powerful reminder that respect is earned through effort, action, and courage, not bestowed by status or pedigree. Crockett's words became a symbol for everyone who has ever been underestimated, dismissed, or belittled. Her composure and clarity proved that principled strength carries its own authority, one that cannot be diminished by condescension or bravado. In her triumph, audiences everywhere saw the possibility of turning challenges into defining moments, moments that resonate far beyond the immediate clash and ripple through communities, conversations, and culture. And now, the story extends to you. If you believe dignity wins, if you recognize the power of courage and integrity, share this story. Let others see what is possible when preparation, resilience, and principle guide the response to arrogance. Subscribe to join the movement of those who value respect over intimidation, truth over elitism, and action over empty words. This is more than a video. It is a call to remember that in every challenge, in every confrontation, the path of dignity and perseverance not only endures but inspires. Your voice, your engagement, your belief in principled courage matters. Stand with her. Stand with the story. And let the world know that dignity always wins.